Hello, everybody, and welcome to Season 4, Episode 17 of History's Greatest Idiots, the show where we look back through all of human history and bring you examples of catastrophic, undeniable stupidity so that you can learn lessons from other people's mistakes and never repeat those mistakes again. But who are we kidding? We're humans. It's fun to make mistakes, and sometimes it makes for very entertaining shows because we've got a really interesting one today. Joining me as ever is my amazing co-host and dear friend, Derek. Derek, how are you doing, my man?
I'm good. Yeah.
Been a bit of a week, isn't it? I think.
You've got your ups and your downs, and you just keep swimming.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think anyone in the world right now who's listening to this or interacting with this podcast can identify with, it's a tough time right now. You know, kind of no matter where you are, what's going on. Life ain't easy right now, but it's summer. So enjoy that summer breeze. It'll make you feel fine. It's really interesting here. Like I think it's 88 degrees here today. So it's lovely and warm.
Oh, wow.
Toastazoid, the perfect thing to wind down from my workout of chopping people and fighting bandits in VR. Man, I wish I could play those VR games. I feel like the weight would drop off me if I had a VR headset and the ability to just lop people's heads off in those games. Those are
sounds
fun.
Intense, man.
Oh, it's so good. You basically give yourself superpowers. So not only can you lop people's heads off, but you can then grab their head, jump 100 feet in the air, and do like a Shaq, like threading it through your legs and dunking it in a basket. Like the VR games are amazing and crazy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, now I guess I have to get a VR game. Well, add that to the list of stuff to spend my money on.
Yes, more tech than we have any time or money for. In Blade and Sorcery, a mod that gave me the giant sword from Berserk. Oh my god, that's so cool. The sword's like 6 foot tall or something. That's amazing. I love Berserk. That's one of the most grotesque anime series of all time. There's a particular scene where just everyone dies. It's horrific. Don't Google Berserk death sequence because, like, man, that is an intense thing.
You know, like 50% of everybody listening right now just Googled it.
Just Googled, yeah, Berserk death sequence. Oh man, it is intense. I would do a good Griffith. Thank you, Toasty. I'd love to do a good Griffith. I think I've got the voice for that. At the main antagonist of the show, although it's not revealed until like halfway through.
Spoiler alert.
Oh yeah, right. That he's a hero to begin with. Canonically supposed to be Welsh too. The stars are aligning right here. Netflix, if you're going to make a series who am I kidding? Netflix aren't going to make that show. There's like people getting their fucking legs bitten off and shit. It's intense. Anyway, away from Berserk. Really lovely weather here. I've spent all day in like I've started taking a polyprobiotic recently again. I stopped taking it because it was too expensive to keep buying it. It's like £44 a month. This is a fair bit of money on top of like everything else we had going on at the moment. But I was like, screw it, I'm going to get myself 6 months worth. And I started taking it and I've immediately started to feel better because each sachet has 450 billion good bacteria in it. So you put it in like a cold drink, ideally something with flavor, and then you down it because, boy, it tastes like ass. But once you take it, like, I'm a week in and I feel like 25% better already because my stomach is much healthier.
Well,
it's
there
really
you go
good.
then.
I swear to God, it's like the miracle juice. The man who broke Apple, was it a war? Was it a worm? Not quite, although Steve Jobs may see him as that, or did. So I've had a really lovely time. I'm enjoying the summer. I'm going on holiday next week. I'm going back to my ancestral home in Wales, and I'm going to have a lovely time on the beaches and on the mountains, and I'm going to walk the dog on the beaches and the mountains, and I'm going to feel like a Celtic warrior who has an autoimmune disease. So it's going to be great. But yeah, it's actually, there's been a little bit of a development, because when I get back from my holiday, one of the first things I'm going to do is send out a Patreon exclusive present to our Patreon who joined us in August of last year. Now, I can't remember who it is, but I'm just going to give a big shout out to everyone of our paying members. So the OG, Jesse Christ, Kimberly Johnson, Andrew Zavara. We've got Dilly Bob, and our most recent addition, Silent Crisis Dan. Thank you all so much for supporting us. A lot of you will be getting your annual gifts soon. And if you would like to join these wonderful people over on Patreon and supporting us by slinging us some cash, go to patreon.com/history's greatest idiots, where you can get a welcome present, and you will get an annual present if you stay with us for a year, and then 2 years, and you'll get behind the scenes stuff like behind the scenes scripts and footage from our lives, including Derek's recent holiday and my adorable dog after her spaying, and a bunch of Patreon exclusive tangents episodes that we do, that never-ending tangents that are really fun, and we basically just never repeat ourselves. We just go on and on. It's wonderful. I didn't think my Viking ancestors would expect me to watch a podcast co-hosted by the descendants of the people they tried super hard to kill. Didn't get us all, you northern bastards. Come to think of it, my English ancestors too. No, they'd just be happy. The English made us quaint. We're fine with that. Okay, that's fine. As a Welsh person, we're fine being quaint and having like wonderful choral singers and lovely golf courses. We're just fine. You go over there and you be English over there. We've got our lovely stuff over here. So yeah. Also, if you'd like to follow us on social media, we do have an Instagram account. If you go to Instagram and search for History's Greatest Idiots, we're there. And if you go on YouTube, if you're listening, you can watch us on YouTube. Most of, if not all of our videos are on YouTube now. Just search for @History's Greatest Idiots, and you'll be able to find us there. Toastoid will stick to our pickled herring sandwiches. Delicious. My mother would love that. I am allergic to seafood, so that ain't happening for me. It's such a sad thing. I'm missing out on so many delicious treats. So our idiot for today, we're carrying on with the format where Derek is providing a bunch of really interesting supplementary material, and I'm covering the main person. And boy, howdy, do we have a really interesting person here. Let me introduce you. Yes, we do. Let me introduce you to John Sculley, the man who nearly ruined the future. It's fair to say. Now, Derek, had you heard of this guy before?
In the Steve Jobs movie.
Yes. Now there were a couple of those made, and weirdly, like I saw the one with who directed it? The guy who wrote West Wing and The Newsroom and stuff. He wrote the Steve Jobs one. I think it's Michael Fassbender is Steve Jobs.
That sounds right.
Yeah, and what's his name? Plays Steve Wozniak. Fucking Seth Rogen. Which is really good casting, actually, when you think about it.
Which one? Gosh, which one was that? Because the one I'm thinking of, the 2013 one with Ashton Kutcher. And
I was going to say, Ashton Kutcher as Steve Jobs, like, if you were to look at a picture of him, you'd be like, that is amazing how close that is to what Steve Jobs looked like. However, the one with Michael Fassbender and Seth Rogen was the superior film, I think, because it was written by Aaron Sorkin, who did The West Wing and The Newsroom and like A Few Good Men and a bunch of really brilliantly written stuff. But Fassbender didn't look as perfect as Steve Jobs as Ashton Kutcher did, but it's a really it's quite a depressing film because Steve Jobs is like 75% of the focus of the film, and he's a massive asshole throughout the whole film, kind of like real life, allegedly. But yeah, like it's a great film. I would recommend you watch it if you've got nothing else to watch. If it's like, it's not the kind of thing that you'd watch on a oh, come on, sit down with me, darling, let's watch this film. It's not a date film. It's like a middle of the day on a Sunday. There's fuck all else on, and you just feel like watching that film. You know, you're not sleepy, because if you fall asleep, you're going to miss the whole thread of the thing. But it's a great film. But no, Steve Jobs, I knew about, and John Sculley in that film is played by, and I've forgotten his fucking name, the other guy in Dumb and Dumber, Jeff Daniels.
Okay.
Yeah. It's somewhat decent casting, but it's Jeff Daniels, so I don't care if it's not ideal, because he's a really good actor. But yeah, like, so did you see him in the other Steve Jobs film?
I can't say that I remember that one.
Right. Okay.
I'm drawing a complete blank. They get Ashton Kutcher brain.
Yeah, the Ashton Kutcher one. I feel like a lot of the stuff with Apple really falls on Steve Jobs. Like, whenever people talk about Apple, it's Steve Jobs. Like 90% of the conversation is about Steve Jobs. Maybe like 8% goes to Wozniak, 1% to Johnny Ive, and then probably like less than 1% to this guy, because people just kind of want to forget that this is a thing that happened. But
he's the Pepsi guy, right?
He is the Pepsi guy.
Okay.
And there's a really interesting conversation, a completely true story of how Steve Jobs sold him. Well, one of the ways Steve Jobs sold him on coming over to Apple. The other one was money. So they had a conversation, and we'll get to that later. But let me just start by talking about John Sculley III. If you didn't think he was rich before, he's John Sculley III. That's sure sign that he's born to money. He's still alive, by the way. One of the older people we've got on this list, and his reputation, it depends who you ask about John Sculley. Some people see him as a bit of a visionary, because he is, other than the Apple stuff, he is super successful. Other people you ask rank him as one of the worst, like, CEOs, presidents of any major company of all time. So extreme reactions either way or the other. I don't have a dog in this fight. I just think the story is fascinating.
Okay.
This one. Yeah.
I'm interested because I remember, like, I just watched a show about when Pepsi got in trouble for accidentally trying to give away a Harrier. Was he
Where's My Jet?
Pepsi? Yeah, was he at Pepsi at the same time? Is that part of this?
He left. No, he left about 8 years before that.
Okay.
But he was part of the culture that sort of established that daring advertising. He established the Pepsi generation.
Okay.
And part of the Pepsi generation advertising is 8 million points gets you a Harrier. And then the kid works out, like, hang on a minute, that's like $500,000. Harriers are worth like 3 million. That's a net gain for me. I'm going for it. So the man is owed a jet, in my opinion. Yeah, I love that documentary. The guy who's just like, he gets in touch with the mountain climber guy who, like, is completely crazy and lives like off grid, and who's beaten cancer twice somehow. It's like, it's a great documentary. I think it's literally just called Pepsi Where's My Jet or something like that. Yeah. So if you go on Netflix and look at Pepsi Where's My Jet, it's a great, like, 2-part documentary or something. I really enjoyed it, and I showed it to my wife, and she was like, "This is really fun." I was like, "No, how often can you say that about a documentary? Usually they're either terrible or really fucking morbid." So but this was fun. It was really interesting. I liked it. And also they do the Pepsi challenge all the way through the documentary, and a bunch of Pepsi executives fail. I love that. You two should watch The Death of Stalin on Netflix. I watched that again recently. Armando Iannucci, who is a comedy genius, wrote that. It's one of the funniest fucking things I have ever seen in my life. Jason Isaacs as, like, Khrushchev or whatever he's playing. He does like this northern accent like that. And I'm like, hey, he's meant to be like a Russian general. What's going on with the accent? It's so weird. Anyway, Death of Stalin, also highly recommend that. I love that film. So John Sculley III was born on April 6th, 1939 in New York City, the son of Margaret Blackburn Smith, a horticulturalist, and John Sculley Jr., a Wall Street lawyer. So
Aha.
there's the money.
Horticultural. That's plants and stuff, right?
Yeah, I guess like someone, not quite a botanist, but this is someone who's like growing like plants. And I guess like if they lived in New York, then you're growing it in difficult conditions, ideally. But basically,
Hedges?
someone who, yeah, just like those like lots in New York where they haven't developed them and they've just turned them into like community gardens. I'd
Okay.
imagine it'd be something like that. But horticultural stuff is really interesting to me. And if I had the physical ability, I would probably have done something in like the world of gardening. But I just don't have the physical gifts for it, unfortunately, because of Crohn's disease. But anyway, Sculley and his brothers spent much of their childhood in Bermuda before moving back to New York. He attended high school at St. Mark's School in Southborough, Massachusetts. I'll have to check with some of the people I know, and I was going to ask you as well. Does spending your childhood in Bermuda when you live in New York, does that mean you're wealthy? Because I mean, his dad's a Wall Street lawyer, so I'd imagine there's a fair chunk of change there, right?
I mean, I think if you're spending like your childhood summers in like a tropical location instead of like
New York.
if you're
Yeah.
going on vacations, you're probably more well off than say the average person.
I'd imagine so. And I feel like the middle class or upper middle class New York summer vacation is like the Catskills, and the upper class holiday is like the Hamptons, maybe something like that. So Bermuda is like a whole other world. Like when you're fucking off to a Caribbean island, like you say, in the summer, then that's like, I feel like that's a sign that they've probably got a second home there or something, So
Yeah, it feels kind of diplomat-y type of stuff. Like you'd
does.
be involved in like politics almost.
Also, Bermuda super lax tax laws. So
Oh, that's why.
I don't want to speculate, but I think that's probably one of the reasons. So Sculley received a bachelor's degree in architectural design from Brown University. Nice. Really cool. Yeah. Weirdly, he didn't pursue architecture, which I feel like could have been a really interesting route, because I have done some design work in my time. We both have. And it fills me with so much joy. It really does, designing stuff. But instead of becoming an architect, he went on and studied an MBA at the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. And in my job, I have helped get interviews with so many people who have done MBAs at the Wharton School. Like, it seems to be where a lot of people who want to be successful in business seem to get high quality degrees from. So so
I recognize the name.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's not like MIT or like Harvard Business School, but the Wharton School is like, I see that a lot, and I guess a lot of people get big successful MBAs from there. Sculley began work at Marschalk Co. in New York City in 1963. For those who aren't familiar with the name, and I can barely even say it, Marschalk Co. was founded as Marschalk and Pratt by Harry C. Marschalk in 1923. In 1953, so 10 years before this guy started working there, it merged with advertising juggernaut McCann Erickson, so which was made very famous to mainstream audiences in the show Mad Men.
See, I never watched that show.
Oh, I love Mad Men. Holy shit. There are no fucking stakes at all.
Okay.
The stakes are, it's the 60s. Everything's a bit shit, really. So I would recommend Mad Men because, first of all, the main character, Don Draper, it's one of those, he's kind of the tail end of that thing in TV where the protagonist had to be like a bit of a massive prick.
Okay.
We had Breaking Bad and we had BoJack Horseman, and just every protagonist in those shows, they're always the worst person in the show. And Don Draper is kind of the last of those, but he's like, when you understand why he is the way he is, like after the character is revealed throughout the show, you're like, okay, I fully understand why this guy is such an asshole. But I like the part where the guy says, "You're all acting like madmen." Yeah, and the term "madmen" was what advertising people on Madison Avenue were called. They were called that because they coined it themselves. So yeah, so the basically the character of Don Draper does not grow or evolve or improve at all throughout Mad Men. If anything, he gets worse. It's the last fucking episode where he gets this moment of clarity, and you're like, oh, he's fine. He finally gets it. Whereas everyone else in the show, all of the supplementary characters, the people who start out as villains, the people who start out as like really meek and stuff, they grow into these incredible, really interesting personalities. Whereas Don Draper's like, his life falls apart slowly, and the whole way through, whenever his like life, you think, oh, he can't get any worse. Like a woman will walk up to him in a bar and go, Jesus Christ, you're handsome. Can I have sex with you? And that's basically the entire series is just him going from like one disaster to another while being surrounded by the most beautiful women on the planet. So it's a really great show. It's beautifully filmed, and the whole thing is a love letter to the 60s, but also the part of the 60s that people leave out, like the part where it was shit for people of, you know, people of color, and for gay people, they were being called perverts to their face and stuff, and women treated like basically cattle throughout the entire show. It's really bad for women until like the very last season when they start to take their hold. It's like there's no stakes, but it's brilliant. And if you want like light relief from life and look at a time when the world was, it looked great, but actually it was much worse, go and watch Mad Men. It's brilliant. There's one scene that always gets me, and it's played out to virtually complete silence. So Don Draper and his wife have taken their kids out for a picnic, and it's this picturesque, like they're on a perfect lawn. It's a beautiful day. He's got the Cadillac in the background, and they're having a picnic on this quilt, and they've got food out. And then they're like, right, I think we better go home now. He's on his fourth beer, and he just like gets up and goes, does a manly stretch, takes him the last swig of the beer, and then just fucking hurls it into the distance. And then the kids come running back to the car, and the mother's like, show me your hands. She's like, right, go to the car. And then she takes the basket, puts it in the car, gets the picnic blanket, and all of the trash, all plastic, all rubbish, all that, just shakes it off, and it just walks away. And nobody said anything, and you just, and it like lingers on this like park, this like picturesque park, and they've just dumped shit everywhere, and you're like, wow, that's how it was in the 60s. So you start with this like perfect picture of like this amazing family, and then they've just left destruction in their wake. It's brilliant.
Yeah. Wow. That's gosh.
It's such a great visual that it stays with you, because you're like, pick that shit up, you lazy bastards. What's wrong with you? You're destroying the world.
That's Mad Men, huh?
Yeah, that's Mad Men. And
I'm gonna have to. That is one that I do have to go back and watch for sure. And I have so many of them that I get saved up that I really should have none of these lulls where I don't have anything to watch.
I get what you mean. You've got the kind of the burden of choice. Like, I've got a million things to choose from, and I don't know which one to start with. But honestly, Mad Men is, it can be, it's quite an emotional show. You know, there's a lot of bad things that happen in it, but actually, in terms of like low stakes, not going to harm you, it's a great program to watch. You'll be like, stop being an asshole, like multiple times per episode, but at the same time, like you'll get it. It was the 60s. It was just like that. So anyway. McCann Erickson featured heavily in Mad Men. They're the big bad to this advertising agency. They are the enemy. And then you get through it and you realize actually they're just exactly the same. They just don't have this genius Don Draper who maybe he's a genius. Actually, maybe he's just lazy and charismatic, but who knows? Anyway, so McCann Erickson, made famous by Mad Men. Sculley left the agency in 1967 to join the Pepsi-Cola division of PepsiCo as a trainee, where he participated in a 6-month training program at the bottling plant in Pittsburgh.
Okay.
So, yeah. That's a pretty cool way to learn the ropes. I mean, he was earning decent money, but like they were like, we want to send you back to the floor so that you understand the processes, how things are made. It's It's a really interesting way of doing it. In 1970, at the age of 30, Sculley became the company's youngest marketing vice president. And one of Sculley's first initiatives is the company's first consumer research studies, an extended in-home product test in which 350 families participated. Pepsi hadn't done any of that. No market testing until that point. They just assumed people liked their stuff. Didn't know why.
Here you go. Yep, everybody's drinking it. See?
Everyone's drinking it. Yep. Can you tell us why you're drinking it? No, don't bother asking them that. We just wanted sales. But actually, he helped build out why people bought when they did, why they bought the things they did, and Pepsi were like, "Oh my god, market research! This is really clever."
Yeah,
as a
easier
result,
to figure out how to sell stuff.
Exactly, like when to sell it, who to sell it to, who to target. They didn't give a shit until that point. As a result of the research, Pepsi decided to launch a new, larger, and more varied packages of their soft drinks, including the 2-liter bottle that Sculley worked with DuPont to develop, the first 2-liter bottle of cola. So, which is kind of the standard size now, I guess.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Big fat round ones. Also, I mentioned DuPont there. He worked with the company DuPont, not John DuPont, the crazy guy from the Foxcatcher movie who was quite fond of guns, possibly gay, and definitely shot a bunch of famous Olympic athletes before being arrested at his giant mansion when he took the trash out. So, another film to watch, Foxcatcher, Steve Carell as John DuPont. He went mad and shot people that were training at his facility. So,
goodness.
Yeah, he was kind of mad. He'd set up his own amateur wrestling team, but he was basically insane and kind of couldn't let go of anything. So,
okay, Foxcatcher?
Foxcatcher, yeah.
Okay.
True story. And Steve Carell got nominated for an Oscar for it. He probably should have won, in my view, but he didn't quite get there. Also, Channing Tatum is in it. Completely serious role for him. There's one scene where he improvises headbutting a mirror until it shatters into a million pieces. Just amazing. Mark Ruffalo's in it as well. It's just a great film.
Huh.
That is depressing, though.
Oh, okay. Well, then I'll wait on that one for a minute.
Have a wait. Watch Mad Men first. That's less depressing than Foxcatcher. So in 1970, Pepsi set out with one goal, that was to dethrone Coca-Cola as the marketing leader of the industry in what eventually became known as the Cola Wars. This is the start of the Cola Wars. Pepsi began spending more on marketing and advertising, typically paying between $200,000 and $300,000 for each TV spot, while most companies were spending between $15,000 and $75,000 for the same spots. So they were paying way over the odds to monopolize these like super strategic slots so that they could kind of get a head up on Coke. It's a known tactic in marketing. It's just if you don't have deep pockets, it won't work because you have to do that consistently for like 5 years to make any back then. So it's a lot of money. With the Pepsi Generation campaign, Pepsi aimed to overturn Coca-Cola's classic marketing. Spoiler alert, it didn't fucking work. But in 1974, Sculley became president of PepsiCo's International Food Operations Division shortly after he visited a failing potato chip factory in Paris, of all places. Didn't think they made potato chips in Paris.
Yeah.
Thought they made
fries.
Yeah, freedom fries, exclusively from France. He goes over there. He's like, these taste good, but you're losing a shitload of money. Let me take over. And they're like, oh, okay, go for it. PepsiCo's food division was their only money-losing division with revenues of just $83 million. I mean, it's a lot of money back in 1970s, but the losses were $156.5 million, so nearly double their income.
Ouch.
Yeah, that's not good.
Yeah.
I think the company sort of let it slide because they were making money everywhere else. But he was like, well, why don't I try and make you money here too?
I had no idea Pepsi had anything to do with food at all.
Oh, yeah. You look now, like Pepsi have got their grubby little fingers in a bunch of different pies. They've got a bunch of different stuff. I can't remember off the top of my head what brands they do have, but they own a bunch of stuff, and they certainly did back in the 70s, mostly snacks connected to their core product of sugar water. So he decided that he was going to take this division and make it profitable. Sculley improved product quality, so they changed what they were actually selling, enhanced accounts by basically making people fucking pay up on time, and established financial controls so that people weren't pilfering money all over the place. Within 3 years, the food division was making $300 million in revenue and $40 million in profit instead of like 60 million in losses. So
that's way better.
Turnaround. Yeah, this guy is good at what he does, and what he does is get everyone's shit together, basically. Sculley was best known, however, for at Pepsi for creating the now legendary Pepsi Challenge. That's him.
Okay, all right.
An advert for those who don't know, because this is like our generation. This is a big part of advertising for us. But for those who don't know, it's the Pepsi Challenge is an advertising campaign that Sculley started in 1975 to compete against Coca-Cola to gain market share using heavily advertised taste tests on the street. It claimed, based on Sculley's own research, that Pepsi Cola tasted better than Coca-Cola. The Pepsi Challenge included a series of television advertisements that first aired in the early 1970s, featuring lifelong Coca-Cola drinkers participating in blind taste tests. Just before we get to the clip, what the fuck is a lifelong Coca-Cola drinker? Is that like an elderly person on their deathbed?
Well, not elderly. They're lifelong Coke drinkers.
Excuse me, sir. I know you're in a considerable amount of pain because the cancer is slowly eating away at you, but would you mind drinking these two liquids and telling us which one you prefer on camera, please? That's my idea of a lifelong Coke drinker. Have you found the Pepsi Challenge?
Yep, I got it.
I've got to see this. I can't remember them myself, but I know that they were a big part of my childhood.
So
1980. Wow, this is one of the...
In city after city, we ask people to take the Pepsi Challenge and let their taste decide.
I want you to tell me what you picked, okay? Pepsi. Pepsi. Pepsi.
Pepsi.
You got any Mountain Dew?
Pepsi.
In tests like these, nationwide, more people prefer Pepsi over Coca-Cola.
Pepsi is more flavored to it. I'm going to tell my friends Pepsi is the best.
Let your taste
No,
decide. Take the Pepsi Challenge.
If you tell your friends that, they're going to call you a fucking loser.
However bad the West might get, you should never.
We're watching a thing on Dubai. So that was the Pepsi Challenge. Really fascinating time, because obviously, like, Pepsi's, like, people would always point out, like, obviously you're not showing the people who go, yeah, please give me the Coke over Pepsi. You know, you're not going to show that on your commercial, are you? So it's like obviously biased, but it worked.
Yeah,
and they ran with it.
That was the I think the core commercials were the ones where they were surprised that it was Pepsi. I think that was what they were supposed to be showing in that one.
Yeah, it makes sense to me to do that kind of advertising, and it was revolutionary, but it's very easily dismissed. It's like the first time Nixon had to go on television in the 1950s and dissuade people that he wasn't a crook and stuff. He was like, no, if I'd known where that money was coming from, I wouldn't have taken it. And like, oh, he seems honest. He's got a dog, and there's his wife. It's fine. Let's trust him. But like in the 1950s, people were less sophisticated with their media than we are now. That being said, people still think that a female boxer is actually a man in the Olympics right now, and that an asylum seeker was responsible for killing 3 girls in Liverpool last week, when in fact it was a naturalized British citizen. So yeah, we're not that media literate yet. People are still stupid. Yeah. So Pepsi soft drink was always chosen as the preferred product by the participants. However, these results have been criticized as being caused by Pepsi's sweetness rather than its superior taste, and also the fact they edited out everyone going, oh my god, that tastes like fucking battery acid. What is that? That snuck into the commercial. The Pepsi Challenge, ironically, so the whole reason the Pepsi Challenge was created, Richard Nixon has the ultimate YouTuber apology video. He gets out a ukulele, starts strumming away, and like, well, what is it? Do what the dormouse said, eat your head, and like, I'm sorry. And do they still sell Pepsi? Yeah. Hey, Kimberly. Hey, yeah. They still sell Pepsi everywhere they don't have Coke. And some places they do. That's unfair. So the Pepsi Challenge was created and almost entirely targeted for one market, the Texas market, where Pepsi had basically no sales. It was a traditional Coke heartland, and they wanted to see more Pepsi sales in there, and that's what they targeted, and it worked. But it spread all over the world, so originally targeted at that. He also sounds like he does in the Monument Mythos. Yeah, that would be super creepy, where he basically sounds like God. So the campaign was successful, significantly increasing Pepsi's market share in the state. At the time the Pepsi Challenge was started, Sculley was senior vice president of the United States sales and marketing operations at Pepsi. Sculley himself took the taste test on camera and picked Coke.
Aha!
Womp womp. Get out of here, Johnny boy. Fucking goofed. In 1977, Sculley was named Pepsi's youngest ever president. This is back in the days when being a president of a company at 38 years old was unheard of. Like that this fucking whippersnapper with his like 15-year-old kid and his 20-year marriage. Like that's back in those days, presidents and CEOs of companies were in their late 50s, early 60s, almost universally white men of that age. And now, you know, it's rare that you see a president that is approaching retirement age. Most of them are in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. So
yeah, I feel like people of our age, that's when they're trying to start squeeze us out. We're too old. They don't want to work with us no more.
That's when you start getting those age discrimination suits coming out, because you got rid of that 43-year-old that just wants an hour for lunch. So although the company called although commonly called the CEO of Pepsi, that was never the case. He was the president. At the time of his departure, Don Kendall was the CEO of Pepsi, not him. After 6 years as president of Pepsi, though, Apple lured Sculley away from Pepsi in order to apply his marketing skills to the personal computer market, which was starting to really grow, but they thought that there was a lot of opportunity for even bigger growth. Hashtag harvest the organs of old people. That's entirely cruel, Toasterzoid, when you could just as easily use them for insulation in your house. So Steve Jobs successfully sealed the deal to get John Sculley away after he made his pitch to Sculley by saying, "Do you want to sell sugar water for the rest of your life, or do you want to come with me and change the world?"
There you go.
That's a pretty good sales pitch right there.
Hell yeah.
And if he had any sense, John Sculley, he'd have responded with, "I am changing the world. I'm giving everyone on the planet type 2 diabetes."
Which he did.
Which he successfully did. Thank you, Pepsi Challenge. Apple's president, Mike Markula, wanted to retire and believed that Jobs, who wished to be the company's president, lacked the discipline and temperament needed to run Apple on a daily basis. He wasn't wrong. Jobs was a maniac. He literally said, "Come with me if you want to live." Yeah, I mean, yeah. It's that sales pitch, isn't it? It's that good. Sculley, with his solid business background and recent successes, high-profile successes as well, because they were very heavily marketed and advertised as well. Pepsi were very good at like saying, "Look at what we've done, aren't we amazing? This guy did it, but it was Pepsi and stuff." So he was getting in all the trade papers and stuff. Sculley, with his solid business background and recent successes, would give Apple an image of greater reliability and stability, which is an interesting thing to look at. In an interview with Authority magazine, because nothing says I'm totally secure in my masculinity and with who I am than calling your magazine Authority, Sculley said that Jobs came to him and said, "How did you do that? You had no money to speak of at Pepsi. How did you pass Coca-Cola?" And I responded, "Well, we call it experience marketing. The focus was on selling the experience, not the product. But you didn't pass Coke. You just improved your market share in one territory." Stop fucking lying, John. Jesus. When Sculley started at Apple, he got $1 million as a signing fee. This is 1983 now.
Damn.
Yeah. That was his signing bonus. $1 million in annual salary. and options on 350,000 Apple shares.
Ooh.
Yeah. Which he's still got to this day. Yeah. So all told, and I'm going to do a lot of 2024 money conversion stuff in this, as I normally do. So that's a $3 million in 2024 money signing bonus, $3 million annual salary, and $220,000 in Apple share. If you convert the monetary value that he was offered at the time, Apple shares were trading at 0.2 cents.
Okay.
So peanuts. Now it's like $294 a share or something stupid like that. And he's got 350,000 shares.
Holy crap.
He's doing okay right there. These figures were double what he was being paid at Pepsi, even though he was the president of the company. So
wow,
I can see why he jumped. Really,
yeah.
That's
Yeah.
a lot of money. From the time Jobs and Sculley first met in 1982 until 1985, they had what they both acknowledged as an amazing partnership. Sculley used his marketing experience to help keep the aging Apple II generating much needed cash and help Jobs launch the Mac with the most admired marketing campaign of its time. And we're going to get to that right after I give you some numbers. The 1984 style auditorium is filled with people chanting at a massive figurehead on a screen when a female Olympic hammer thrower chucks a giant sledgehammer at the screen, destroying it and freeing the people in the room. It's confusing as fuck. It's iconic. It's directed by Ridley Goddamn Scott. And it premiered at the 1984 Super Bowl event in a slot that cost $370,000 at the time, so 1.1 million in 2024 money. The production budget was $900,000 or 2.8 million in 2024 money for a 30-second advert. The multiple actors who appeared in the commercial were paid $25 a day or $78 in 2024 money, which raises the question, where the fuck did the rest of the money go? To cover the losses of Blade Runner or something? But yeah. Anyway, we have, what does this say here? My eyes were immediately drawn to the Fortnite in the title. There you go. So now let's watch the classic and probably one of the most iconic adverts of all time, the 1984 Apple Macintosh advert. Let's go for it.
I lost it.
That's okay. We're going to get there. So did we have Fortnite in the title?
I lost it.
That being thing. It's okay. It's honestly, so this is 2 years after Blade Runner. Blade Runner was, people loved that film, but no one went to see it back in the 80s. It lost a bunch of money. It's obviously gone on to be considered one of the greatest science fiction films of all time. And I genuinely love it. I think most people do. And that's why it got a sequel, with Ryan Gosling all those years later. So let's see if we can get.
There it goes.
May we celebrate the first glorious anniversary of the information purification directives created for the first time in all history, a garden of pure ideology where each worker may bloom, secure from the pests of a contradictory influence. Unification of the rules is more powerful a weapon than any fleet or army on earth. We are one people, with one will, one resolve.
That's a hell of a set.
Our enemies shall talk themselves to death, and we will bury them with their own confusion. We shall prevail.
Yeah.
On January 24th, Apple Computer will introduce Macintosh. And you'll see why 1984 won't be like 1984.
I mean, it's a great advert, but what the fuck does it mean?
I don't know, because it was for this one, right?
We're allowed to use this footage. So yeah, that's the Mac 2. I wonder, because the Mac 1, did they even release that? I can't remember. I think it was for that. Were they allowed to use the footage from the Hour of Hate from 1984? Isn't that copyright violation? I don't know, man. We're doing it for reasons of commentary, and therefore it's transformative. So I guess we'll be okay, but I don't know about them. So
Yeah, I don't know how they did that for their. I guess they probably paid it. Maybe that was what the $3 million was for the advertisement, paying for the rights to use the scene from 1984 in their stupid ass commercial that didn't make any sense.
Yeah, they fucking co-opted it very successfully, and I guess they'll say that it's not quite the same. It's like intellectually distinct, a close homage, maybe. But yeah, it was a huge success. It was launched during the Super Bowl and went on to massive success. But this is kind of a bit of a turning point for Apple, because once Jobs took over the Macintosh project from Apple co-founder Steve Wozniak and early employee Jeff Raskin, he became the executive product manager and made all of the product decisions. And unfortunately, he had a bunch of teams under him at this point, and he became a bit of a nightmare to work with because he was completely obsessed. Fortnite made a parody ad of that when Fortnite was removed from the App Store. I didn't know that. A lot of people have done parody adverts of it. I think Futurama did, where they were like, we're a delivery company, let's do this, and they just did the exact advert, and they're like, I don't really know what that advert says about what we do. I don't know what it means. So yeah, that's literally it. So Jobs, the Lisa computer, an innovative model designed by a team initially led by Jobs, became available in January 1983 and had disastrous sales. It completely failed. So all of the money was riding on the Macintosh at this point. And when Jobs' Macintosh, the first of a new series of models with a pioneering black and white graphical user interface, was shipped to stores in January 1984, Sculley stepped in and raised the initial price from $1,995, a shitload of money back in 1983. He raised it to $2,495, another $500 on top of that sucker. Yeah, it's a lot of money.
So, to help it sell better?
Well, I think the thinking was it was going to be exclusive, and it was a powerful thing, and the advertising campaign and blah, blah, blah. Anyway, allocating the additional money to hypothetically higher profit margins, and as a result of the expensive advertising campaign, they had to claw some money back. But the Macintosh sold really well. Like, these fucking things were everywhere and received excellent reviews, but it did not eliminate the IBM PC, which was kind of the point of the Macintosh 2, was to just wipe the floor with the PC. But the problem is the PCs weren't $2,500. They were like $1,000, you know? So you're always going to have people like, we've been talking a lot recently about the BYD Seagull and how Tesla produced these brilliant cars despite their chairman's interference. But there is always going to be a segment of the electric car market audience that want a cheap model. And if that BYD Seagull becomes available in the UK for £15,000, which it looks like it will be, I will be in the queue for that fucking thing, because $15,000 for an electric car that will do like 180 miles minimum, I'm there for that. And that's the difference, is people want something, but they're not going to pay your prices if it's premium. They'll go for the cheaper model. So,
yeah.
You know?
Yeah, well, and I mean, they do that here. Like the Nissan Leaf, I think, sold really well.
It did here too.
I mean, doesn't have the range really, but
like 100 miles. Yeah. Especially the second-hand ones. But yeah, like people will go for the cheaper models, and you're never gonna, if you're a high-class, expensive product, you're never gonna wipe the floor with the cheaper models. They will always outsell you. So at the peak of the Macintosh success, however, Apple made an attempt to move unsold inventory of Lisa computers by renaming them to Macintosh XL and positioning it as a top-of-the-line Pro Macintosh model. Didn't work. Didn't work at all. The car should have a lightning rod so it can charge from lightning strikes. Yeah, like Back to the Future. Oh my God, we've just solved the energy crisis. Feeling confident, Sculley recycled the Pepsi Challenge idea at Apple and created an equivalent campaign called Test Drive a Macintosh. Catchy. In a 1984 edition of Newsweek, Apple took out a 16 pages of advertising. That's like half the fucking magazine, costing more than $2.5 million, according to Owen Linsmeyer's book, Apple Confidential 2.0, promoting this idea. The idea was simple. If you gave Apple your credit card details for security reasons and you filled out a form, you could take home a Macintosh to try and see if you liked it. 200,000 people signed up as a result of this advertising, which, if you consider they were going for $2,500, that's a good amount of money right there. Sculley was 100% certain that just using a Mac would convince people to buy it. It's a nice idea in principle, but unfortunately, it didn't work. Most people got it home and they were like, I want a PC. This is basically a PC, only twice as expensive.
And it looked like this.
Yeah, that's
like, here, give me $2,000 and have this thing. Come on.
Oh my god! Hello, computer. Hello, computer. Oh my god!
That?
It was. Did this guy invent the terms and conditions? I feel like he might have done. Actually, like that's.
God,
it's not far. Look at that fucking thing. $2,500. I mean, it's cute. That's the ugliest goddamn computer I've ever seen. Toasty, boy. If you're our age, you've seen some ugly fucking monsters, but it's not far off. But for like, I guess 1984, that's about as good as it got. Anyway, of the 200,000 that people had taken home, something like 195,000 were returned. And some of them were returned damaged because people couldn't get the fucking floppy disks out. So they were like sticking forks and knives in there and shit to try and get it out. A large proportion of the Macintoshes were simply returned at the end of the trial, slightly damaged, costing Apple hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost sales and even more money. The massive failure leaked to the press, damaging their image. Like, people don't want your computers, and the press found out. That is not good. That is a poor excuse for a device. It certainly was. At this point, after both of them failing essentially at two different things, a power struggle broke out between Jobs and Sculley. Jobs became non-linear. He kept meetings running past midnight. He was eating nothing but fruit all day. His shit
fruitarian
constant. And he sent out lengthy faxes, then called new meetings at 7 a.m. after the other meetings had finished at midnight. So people would have to get home, go to sleep, get up, take their kids to school. What? 7 o'clock meeting? Sculley had little control over the Macintosh division, where Jobs was the general manager. Steve Jobs was a weird guy. He was a really, really weird guy. Very good at some things, but also insane and a bit of a prick. So...
Well, he never left the office because he couldn't get too far from the toilet from all of the fruit he was eating.
I know, he was just driving around everywhere in the toilet.
Fired right through him.
Him and, like, fucking John Wayne, like, towards the last few years of his life, just, like, constantly shitting. Like, that must have been terrible. So the Apple board of directors instructed Sculley to contain Jobs and limit his ability to launch expensive forays into untested products. Rather than submit to Sculley's direction, Jobs attempted to oust him and from his leadership role at Apple. This partnership sounds like it's slightly shaky at this point. Sculley found out about Jobs' plan and called a board meeting in the middle of the fucking night that Jobs attended because he was already there. He was calling another meeting. The board of directors sided with Sculley and removed Jobs from his managerial duties. Jobs resigned from Apple and founded NEXT Inc. the same year, which was a massive fucking disaster, but it did the trick. Henry Ford had all vegetarian diet and tried convincing his so that the diet would cure his cancer, pretty similar to what Steve did. Yeah. Take medicine. Please take medicine. Not alternate. Like, don't try and cure yourself with food. It's not enough. Cancer will kill you very quickly. Have targeted medication. Please.
Yeah. Vegetarianism, fruitarianism, just drinking a
Fruitarianism.
lot of water, eating nothing but graham crackers. None of that really works
Yeah.
to cure
Trying
anything.
to live off sunlight. Some people do that. Yeah, seriously. Medicines work. I know medicine has got a bad rap, but take your meds if you need to.
Not saying don't
have
drink
good-
water and eat your vegetables, though.
Eat vegetables, drink water, all of that wonderful stuff if you can, but take fucking meds at the same time. So Sculley said in 2015 that Jobs never forgave him for getting him kicked out of the company. I mean, that doesn't surprise me at all. And that he tried to get into contact with Jobs on his deathbed, and Jobs wouldn't take his call.
Ouch.
Yeah, and this is okay. One of Steve Jobs' last things when he was on his deathbed was to kind of bequeath Apple $70 billion to destroy Google.
Yeah.
He's like, take them down. So that was Steve Jobs. I am not surprised he didn't take your call, man. After Jobs left, Sculley was named president, and the company experienced a bit of a turnaround in 1986. One journalist wrote, since Sculley joined the company, many things have changed, and that his strategy has worked. Wozniak credited the Macintosh's initial success to Sculley, not Jobs, saying that he worked to build a Macintosh market when the Apple II went away. So that's interesting. So even though the Macintosh was all Jobs, he's saying that the market was more important. So he created the demand for the product as opposed to the actual product itself. So it goes back to Sculley's idea of the product doesn't matter, it's the experience. So he created the experience around the product. So that's what Wozniak was saying. And the direction of Sculley, who had learned several painful lessons after introducing the bulky Macintosh Portable in 1989, which flopped hard, Apple introduced the PowerBook in 1991. The PowerBook was an immediate success on launch, the various models. And look at that beautiful bastard there on the screen. Look at it. It's the bulkiest. Look at the mouse.
Oh, yeah,
roll
that
and
scroll ball.
trackpad. Oh, my God. It looks like a clown's face. It's fucking terrifying. It's so... the thing is, first of all, I like my 120 keyboards. Like, I like having a numpad and stuff.
Oh yeah,
because I do a lot of numbers and stuff. That's my jam. So this kind of strikes fear into me a little bit. It looks like a portable DVD player you take with you on long car rides as a kid. Yeah, it's basically what it is.
And this is the portable, the other portable, the first portable.
Could you imagine lugging that fucking thing around? Like,
yeah, because this just closes on the front here. And the back is still just computer, and it kind of looks like, this.
That is so fucking big.
But opened up.
I mean, if you get into a street fight, you can use that as a weapon of self-defense or offense. Really, you can take people out with that fucking thing. That's some solid hardware right there. Good God. That is the least portable thing I've ever had the displeasure of laying eyes on. Yeah. I wonder how much it weighed. It must have been like 30, 40 pounds. I'd have thought, like, because they were big, heavy things back then.
I'll see if I can find it.
See if you can find the specs. But anyway, so the PowerBook was an immediate success, if you can believe it. On launch, the eclectic version of Mountain Chicken, the electronic version of Mountain Chicken. Yeah, it's a big fucking
5
thing.
pounds.
Really? Is that all?
That's
Holy
pretty
shit.
heavy.
I mean, yeah,
Wait,
but
that's the 91 PowerBook.
I was going to say, like, can that be right? 5 pounds? That can't be right. Maybe the battery weighed 5 pounds, but the fucking machine, surely not. Anyway, if it did, well done, Apple. Like, that's a win for you guys right there. The PowerBook on its launch took up 40% of laptop sales for that year, so that's a big success. What are you going to say?
15.8 pounds.
Okay, that's more like it. Yeah, that's I feel like you could still carry 16 pounds around with you for the day, but like you'd notice it after the first couple of hours, right? You'd be like, okay, one of my shoulders is getting fucked today. So that's it, really.
Yeah, that the portable. So this one
Yeah.
is the 15.8 pounds, and that's the first one that came out.
Jesus.
And then the PowerBook came out in 91, and that's the like 6 pounds.
Right, that's better actually, and £6 totally manageable as a portable. And also, we got to remember in 1991, people are not like, oh, I'm just going to kick back and play a game on my PC for a little bit. They're just doing word processing and spreadsheets.
Right,
like that's it, you know, and maybe early forms of note taking or emails or whatever. But you know, that's pretty much all people are doing with those things. Unfortunately, Sculley failed to hang on to the team that created the PowerBook and who left to join Compaq, even a company that copied the PowerBook immediately and charged significantly less than it cost to buy that thing. Don't forget the Oregon Trail. Oh my God, you could have played that then. That would have been, yes, we were talking about that before we went on air. You could have played Oregon Trail on that for sure. Worse still, the PowerBook started overheating. But yeah, early models, in fact, most of them, as far as I can remember, started overheating and cooking people's crotches, producing a smell I can only imagine was horrific. Since nobody took care of their junk in the 90s, like nobody was trimming their balls or like making it smell nice, or even really washing down there. Really, it must have smelled like burning hair and illegal rave sweat or something. So,
oh yeah, man, it's the 90s, man. It was grunges and rages.
They're all going out, dropping ecstasy, and just dancing the night away. In 1991, Apple also introduced System 7. Manscaped didn't exist back then. No, it was just, you know, a couple of eggs in a bird's nest. A major upgrade. Sorry, that was quite graphic. Apple also introduced in 1991 System 7, a major upgrade to the operating system, which added color to the interface and introduced new networking capabilities. It remained the architecture basis for Mac OS until 2001, when the classic Mac OS was replaced by Mac OS X. Unfortunately, System 7 needed, on every computer it was on, 1 megabyte of RAM to boot up. Significantly more than System 6's 600K. You'd have a floppy disk in there, which would be 800K, but it was in there. You boot it up, you take it out, you're fine. And then the system needed 600K to boot it up. This thing needed 1 megabyte of dedicated RAM, and most of the Macs that were being purchased around this time did not ship with 1 megabyte of RAM spare that you could use, because they would grind to a fucking halt immediately on startup. So it took years for that system to become operational. It was a bit of a disaster, meaning that you basically had a very pretty brick set in your office. It's time to break out the typewriter, basically. Have you got a picture there of early 90s Mac? We've got to talk about
this quality design.
We've got to talk about the point, and this is a famous thing about Apple, and this is something Johnny Ive talks about in his biography, and it's something I've read. I loved reading his biography. When he arrived at Apple, the engineers had been designing the computers for years, and this is what you get when you let engineers design a PC. You have speakers on the bottom so that they're magnetizing everything around them, and then you have no symmetry whatsoever, just like
good top heavy here.
Really top heavy. Like that is, I understand like a bit more space at the bottom so you can put stuff around it, but it's just an ugly fucking thing. And if you think about how sleek the Mac 2 was back in 1983, almost 10 years before this fucking thing, look at what it's become. It's just a mess of buttons and it's horrible.
But it gets better later.
Oh, it does. It's so much better later. And so, despite early warning signs that Sculley actually didn't really have a clue what he was doing, it appeared that Apple could do no wrong. The magazine Mac Addict named the period between 1989 and 1991 as the first golden age of Macintosh. It's like the computer is trying to mog at me. I don't know what that means, but
I don't either.
It sounds bad, and yeah, that's an ugly fucking computer. So whatever that means, yes. Under the leadership of Sculley, Apple's sales multiplied from 982 million in 1983 to 7.9 billion in 1993. So in the space of 10 years, yeah, that's $25 billion in 2024 money. Now, critics argue that a lot of this is down to the natural growth in the PC and laptop markets, and also the after effects of Steve Jobs' culture of innovation, where people would bust a gut trying to create the most innovative, cutting-edge design things and then charge a shitload of money for them. And that Sculley actually just really takes credit, but he didn't contribute a huge amount. I think that's unfair. I think he definitely had a huge amount of influence over the marketing and the way these things were positioned and the price points and stuff, which is a big part of any success. But I think in terms of the innovation, that probably came from the people inside at Apple. I don't think his leadership had a huge amount to do with that. We're going to get to his biggest mistake right now. In fact, around about this time, Microsoft threatened to discontinue Microsoft Office for the Macintosh if Apple did not license parts of the Macintosh graphic user interface to use in the Windows operating system. So they wanted to use parts of the existing OS in their own operating system. Under pressure, Sculley agreed, a decision which later affected the Apple versus Macintosh lawsuit. There's no way to understate this. This is at the point where people are not willing to pay $2,000 for a Mac anymore, because the PCs are now looking more and more like Macs. They're doing the same stuff for like half, a third the price. And the market share that Apple had that was like 40% at one point is starting to drop year on year, sometimes double digits in a single year under his leadership. He gave the keys to the kingdom to the opposition by handing over this part of the graphical user interface. And Apple, Microsoft, and IBM ate away at their market share. And Sculley would have been well within his rights to just tell them to fuck off, but he didn't. And it cost the company big. So
there's a mistake.
Yeah. Being so scared of your opposition. I think he was afraid of antitrust laws, which ironically is what kind of Bill Gates got done with at Microsoft, and that Google is currently in a really bad position with the search function. But he was so worried about that, he just sort of handed over the stuff that they wanted, and that was a big mistake. Also around that time, Sculley allegedly, according to some people who like him, coined the term personal digital assistant, or PDAs, referring to the Apple Newton, one of the world's first PDAs, a product Sculley oversaw and launched in 1993. Here is what we're looking at. This is an Apple Newton right next to an iPhone. It is the progenitor of the iPhone, and I kind of love it.
iPhone.
It does. And if you look at it, I actually quite like that design. I think it came with a stylus. I could be wrong.
I think so too.
Yeah, nothing ever beat Clippy. No, Clippy for market dominance right there. But look, I think that's a really well designed thing, and the Newton was a disaster of a thing. Really? It fucking failed hard. We'll talk about that now. Where was I? He's launched the PDAs. According to sources outside of Apple, however, most claim that Sculley had to be badgered into releasing the Newton. And then as soon as journalists, insiders came in and called it, a huge innovation, he claimed most of the credit for himself, even though he had to be really pushed into releasing this thing. He was really worried at this point about the falling market share, and he didn't want to take any chances, but unfortunately you have to in the computer tech business. Bizarrely, at the very same time that this was happening, Sculley had created a team, another team, entirely different team, to make a different product that was effectively the same thing. So it was just like, you do that over there, you do that over there, but aren't we doing the same thing? No, totally different. Don't worry about it. But they were doing exactly the same thing. That
Really?
team was later spun off into a separate firm called General Magic, which immediately failed and cost Apple millions of dollars in wasted time and labor costs. So that's more money down the drain, which they just can't afford. Even more insane, because Sculley was brought in to kind of manage Steve Jobs. Unfortunately, what he should have been doing was managing Apple's board, who are impatient to get money and don't give a shit how they get it. Damn the long-term consequences. Sculley caved into pressure from the Apple board and announced the Newton far, far too soon. How soon before it was due to be launched? 14 months before
Oops.
it was due to go to market. Not 3 months out, not 2 months out, not a month before launch. 14 months out. Look at that beautiful thing. Look at
Yeah,
it.
that's cool.
That is so
There's
cool.
the stylus.
Oh, I love it. I miss the 90s. Wasn't life simpler when we were children?
Yeah.
But yeah, so 14 months. He made a big splash with it. Everything looked great. But it would take another 14 months before the Newton was even possible to ship. So when it did, it wasn't as good as perhaps it could have been. It definitely was way more expensive than anyone wanted. And with 14 months' notice, the competitors had gotten hold of the specs and already created cheaper versions
Oops.
to rival it. Yeah, you are fucked. That's why the Newton failed, because the board pressured him and he caved instead of saying, why don't we leave it 6 months? You leave it 6 months, no one's creating a rival to this thing. You also keep your marketing costs down because you're not spending 14 months building up to it. You're spending 6 months building up to it or whatever. So anyway, his competitors completely destroyed him. Also around about this time, he created this this presentation thing called the Knowledge Navigator, which was like his way of getting eyes on Apple and himself as like market leaders in innovation. And he predicted what eventually would be fulfilled by the internet and the World Wide Web during the 1990s, and by Apple itself in introducing Siri. He supposedly predicted a connected world and an interactive assistant, a personal assistant, and stuff like that. His critics are less kind towards what actually happened, saying that Sculley believed himself to be a technological innovator despite the fact he could barely turn on his own fucking PC. He has since said that his lack of knowledge about computers means it was a big mistake for Apple to have even hired him in the first place. So they hired a guy who was a bit of a technophobe to be the president and CEO of a tech company. His critics also point out that the Knowledge Navigator, this big project of his, was little more than a collage of existing ideas and white papers that had been written and created by much smarter people that he'd co-opted, put in a beautiful presentation, and put a bit of cute music behind it. So that's
yeah, I'm
basically
trying to get that pulled up here for us right now.
I've never seen it. I feel like it's like Epcot when you go through the Disney's version of what tomorrow will look like, and it's just the 1960s with talking video screens. So I don't know if that's there, but apparently it's revolutionary depending on who you speak to.
Oh goodness.
Yeah. It's
a video.
Yeah. It's probably quite long, I'd imagine.
5
right?
minutes long, but it's dumb. Sorry. Sorry, guys. I'm not going to share it with you.
We're not going to show you a dumb thing. In the early 90s, Sculley led Apple to port its operating system to run on new microprocessors, the Power PC. Sculley later acknowledged that such an act was his greatest mistake. That's debatable, indicating that he should have instead targeted the dominant Intel architecture instead. So they tried to work with AIM and a bunch of Motorola to create their own chip to kind of go against Intel. It didn't work, and it wasn't anywhere near as powerful. After a bad first quarter in 1993, and all of those previous disasters that I've just mentioned, and a personal computer price war and internal tension over the company's direction, a series of bizarre decisions that cost the company millions on wasted ideas, gimmicks, and pie in the sky thinking. Apple's board forced Sculley out. He resigned on October the 15th, 1993, and was replaced by German-born Michael Spindler, who had been chief operating officer. Spindler was ousted 3 years later and replaced with Gil Amelio. In 1997, amidst poor financial performance, Apple would acquire Steve Jobs' Next software, and Jobs would oust Amelio and reinstate himself as CEO. And also, sorry, just in the interim, they talk about Next software. Jobs also owned Pixar in the time between, and sold it to Disney for billions of dollars. So,
brilliant.
Yeah,
Oh.
he had enough money to do some really crazy things at Apple, and the rest, as they say, is history. That's the Knowledge Navigator. Look at it.
What? Like, I don't even know exactly what it is, but it looks like some sort of software.
I think it's like, do you remember the film Big? When he
Bicycle
proposes
for the
like,
mind? What does that even mean?
is it like you pull out the slides and you put new ones in? Like, what the fuck is this thing? A bicycle for the mind? Optimized for business and education. I'm sorry, you got to pick one lane there. You can't say optimized for business and education. You've got to pick one of those two niches. Holy shit.
Boy.
Look at how ugly that fucking thing is as well. How is that ergonomic? It's got like a corner missing.
I don't, I'm not
wow.
even sure what that is.
That's
okay.
awful.
So that was his big idea. And,
That was his big idea.
Steve Jobs is over here doing Pixar.
Steve Jobs is doing Pixar, ironically losing $1 million a month at Pixar, because they were like trying to create stuff that had never been done before. And then Toy Story came out and it blew people's minds. And then they just had hit after hit after hit after hit. Disney came in for like, I think it was $1 or $2 billion, bought Pixar. Very smart money in the long run, because they've made hundreds of billions of dollars off the Pixar creations. But it meant that Jobs was free of debt and clear to go back into Apple and really revolutionize things. And round about this time, Jobs hired a young designer by the name of Johnny Ive, and together they would design and create the iMac, the Power Mac G4 Cube, the iPod, the iPhone, the iPad, the MacBook, and the user interface of Apple's mobile operating system, iOS, among other products. Sir Johnny Ive, as he was known at this point, went on to design Apple Park, the big, menacing, round fucking headquarters in Cupertino, California, that looks like something out of a dystopian nightmare. And he also, and this is like, I mean, we talk about the iPhone, the iPod, the iMac, the iPad, the MacBook Pro. Look at the iMac. That's the first thing Johnny Ive designed for Apple. It's an icon of the 21st century. That is a fucking beautiful computer. I remember using it. It was a joy. Fun fact, in 2017, Pixar paid tribute to Jobs at the end of the movie Coco. Was it just everyone eating fruit? Was that the end of the film? I guess so. It makes sense, because that was around about the time he passed away, I think, wasn't it? So, but I mean, look at the iMac. It came in so many different colors. The advertising campaign for that was brilliant. They emphasized the color and the fact that it stood out. It looked so different from every other computer on the market.
And then they went with the...
Yeah, and those were cute. Those were everywhere. Oh my God. Johnny Ive with the most beautiful, basic, straightforward designs. And then I think the big change for me was probably the original iPod, because all of a sudden it's just a thing with a circular trackpad on it. And you're like, okay, and this is all I need? Great. Okay, yeah. I can go jogging for hours and listen to 100 songs. Oh my God. One of the most important things, and one of the lasting legacies of Johnny Ive, he's still alive, by the way. He created the design, look, feel, and atmosphere of every Apple store in the world. So
really,
yes, Johnny Ive designed the layouts, the flow, how people would talk to the people that came into the store. So he wasn't just the designer. He created, ironically, what our friend Scully over here would have loved: the experience around
How
the
about
product.
that?
Yeah. So he wasn't just the designer who created these iconic, beautiful things that have shaped our world. He created an actual experience of going into a place, of walking through an air-conditioned door, of being greeted, of being treated like, royalty to a certain extent, of the hype around it. He was all focused on that. And basically, Jobs had hired the greatest, and has been voted recently the greatest designer of the 21st century. He went to the same university as me. He was like 15 years before me, but like, yeah, same place as me. And basically increased these two, Jobs, Johnny Ive, and a bunch of other people who also deserve a huge amount of credit, increased Apple's market share from 0.5% when they came in. That's how low they'd sunk in the PC market in 1998, to around about 10% in 2024.
Wow.
And the market is significantly bigger than when they came in. So, 1 in 10 of any computer that is sold in the world now is a Mac of some description, or an Apple. So,
Well, I'm telling you, like, I've been a Samsung guy here forever.
yeah.
We're making a switch to change our services for a different state. I've never had the pleasure of being in an Apple store.
Wow.
I've never had the experience of Apple, and I'm scared, but we're making the switch. I'm going to be an Apple person now.
You are going to leave that store with nothing in your wallet.
I don't have anything in my wallet now.
They listen. I am very careful about what Apple products I buy. You can get versions of Apple products for cheaper than what they sell. So if they try and get you on some AirPods, get yourself a cheaper version. Like all of the supplementary stuff. The infrastructure in the iPhone is brilliant. The interface is beautiful. It's one of the greatest user interfaces ever designed. It's super easy to use. It's intuitive. My 85-year-old grandmother picked one up, and within 5 minutes she was using it. And she hated computers. She retired when computers became a thing. That's how much she hated them. And yet she picked up the iPhone and immediately started using it. So that's how powerful it is.
I just realized I'm going to have to redo all of my headphones and my watch and everything else now.
Yeah, fucking monopolizing stuff. Also, Apple, you were just talking about the phones that you're looking at. 20% of worldwide mobile phone devices and tablet devices are Apple products. And that was a market that was doing quite well, but the tablet market blew up as soon as the iPad arrived, and is now huge as a result. After leaving Apple in October 23rd, 1993, Sculley became chairman and chief executive officer at Spectrum Information Technologies, a New York-based company that held key computer patents for wireless data transmission, so Wi-Fi. Only 4 months later, he resigned from the company and filed a lawsuit against Spectrum president Peter Caserta, seeking more than $10 million in damages. Sculley alleged that he was misled when he was hired at Spectrum by not being told of SEC inquiries and aggressive revenue recognition accounting for license fees. The lawsuit came to nothing. So, but like, you might think, oh, this is where he fades into like nothingness. Actually, after this, he had a very successful career working with a number of tech startup firms and like kind of established names, leading them to multiply their value by up to 10 times the level of when he joined. There was one company was earning $45 million a year. He brought that up to $540 million a year. Can't remember the names. They're all like blah, blah, blah and co and this and stuff. And they're like, I've never heard of them, but they're all worth hundreds of millions of dollars, mostly thanks to this guy. He's generally well regarded in the tech industry, despite the fact that he wasn't a tech guy, mostly for his business acumen and his marketing brain. So much so that he even started to make his way into politics and became so tight with the Clintons that he sat next to Hillary at Bill Clinton's first State of the Union address in 1993.
Aha. See, I told you that Bermuda thing was political.
There you go. the island. Unfortunately, the wider tech world and Apple fandom sees him as at best a divisive figure, and at worst, if you're an Apple fanboy, there's a lot of them out there, the man that briefly derailed the Jobs worldwide domination train and released a bunch of increasingly dodgy products that damaged the company's reputation. He was the archetypal corporate manager, yet he failed to manage Apple the way that Apple needed to be run at the time. You don't need to be an engineer to run a tech company, and you don't need to be a visionary to make a successful business. John Sculley acted like a visionary leader, but he needed to actually set the trends in a timely fashion, or set the company's course to where those trends were going on that time, and not too early or too late, instead of bending to other pressures, which is what he did, and it cost him his job. And we have one final clip of Steve Jobs talking about John Sculley, and it's the most backhanded shit I've ever seen in my life.
One of the things that really hurt Apple was after I left, John Sculley got a very serious disease. And that disease, I've seen other people get it too. It's the disease of thinking that a really great idea is 90% of the work. And that if you just tell all these other people, here's this great idea, then of course they can go off and make it happen. And the problem with that is that there's just a tremendous amount of craftsmanship in between a great idea and a great product. And
I don't know if you wanted to keep going with it or not.
No, that kind of makes the point of what he's saying, is that you look at the early days of Apple, they spent ages in that garage making the first Macintosh. And then, Jobs had to go from that. He let Wozniak kind of continue making the thing. Then he had to go to being the guy who had to sell everything and bring people in on the vision and stuff like that. And he did it. What he's basically saying is Sculley thought that all of the work was coming up with the idea, like go away and make this happen. Actually, it's not that simple, especially when you're dealing with technology. You have to realize that your dreams need to be tempered, they need to be realistic, and you need to market them properly. And unfortunately, Sculley would come up with the idea and he could market it, but if it didn't work, then the company's reputation is damaged. So, and I think that's kind of it for John Sculley. Now, John Sculley, again, depends on which side of the fence you fall on, was either the right man for the job at the wrong time, or just kind of set the company back years and lost them huge amounts of market share to, Microsoft and IBM and people like that. But it's an interesting story, and I think a lot of it is built around the whole premise of what if Jobs wasn't ousted? What if he'd stayed at Apple and continued with his vision? Would Apple still be a thing? Would there be no Microsoft? Would there be no PC market? Would it be all Macs? Or actually, was he ousted at the right time because he was losing his mind and going a bit crazy? What are your thoughts on John Sculley and his place with all this?
Man, I think it all happened the way that it needed to happen, I suppose. But he could have probably not lost them so much money. Like, they could have worked together better, I think. And, like, just try to, like, understand each other better and, like, not be. But, I mean, that's the thing when you're, like, a business leader and you're that guy or woman, you're not, you know best, and you're in charge, damn it. And when you're in charge with somebody else, it's sometimes it causes that problem, I think.
It takes a very special person to be the person in charge at the very top, where the decisions you make, nobody's going to really overrule you or tell you that's bad. You just have to live with the consequences of that decision, come what may, whether it works or it doesn't work. And this guy came up with some good ideas. They weren't always executed well. The board pushed back. Some things didn't work out. He came up with a lot of bad ideas, and there was a lot of missed opportunities. But ultimately, you could make the argument that Jobs was making equally crazy decisions at the time. So they probably both would have been fired eventually, even if Steve Jobs stayed in that position. And actually, as a result of Jobs going away and doing the Pixar thing and the next thing and all of the other like little crazy things that he did, and wearing polo necks, inspiring Elizabeth Holmes to have a deeper voice, you suddenly get a world where the entire technological interface, user interfaces, user experiences, Macs, even things like microtransactions, app stores, subscription models, a lot of this comes about because Steve Jobs comes back into Apple in the early 2000s and changes the way that people view different pieces of technology. And we are living in a world that comes about because of Steve Jobs's drive to change everything around him. And that doesn't happen unless John Sculley comes in and kind of sort of demolishes Apple's image for a bit.
Yeah.
Really.
It
You know?
gives him the chance to go off and reset that he needed to do to come back with new ideas.
Exactly. He came back in, he changed the world, and since Steve Jobs passed away, the levels of innovation at Apple have dropped. You don't really see like the big stuff. Apple aren't releasing an iPod. Oh my God, it's changed the way people listen to music. An iPhone. Oh my God, like it's changed the way people use their mobile phones. An iPad. Oh my God, everyone needs an iPad, even though it's just a bigger iPhone. Why the fuck do we need an iPad? You know, all of these revolutionary things, super powerful, very expensive PCs. I remember 15 years ago, my friend bought a Mac, and it had a terabyte of RAM. I know, and things don't have terabytes of RAM now. I was like, how much did you spend on this? And he was like $15,000. And I was like, are you out of your fucking mind? He was like, well, I need it for editing. I was like, I don't care if you're editing the history of the universe. No one needs a terabyte of RAM. That's crazy. The computer I'm talking to you on right now has 36 gig of RAM. And even that's a lot, you know? So
I don't even know what mine has.
my old one had a potato that I would occasionally juice up a little bit, and it would give me some RAM. But, you know, that's the world we're living in now, where Apple have gone premium. The premium tech world has been completely influenced by Apple and Steve Jobs, and also the closed ecosystem where you cannot buy anything that isn't recommended by Apple or approved by Apple. That's all Steve Jobs. The closed ecosystem as a business model, that's Steve Jobs. So, yeah, amazing person. John Sculley, in terms of scoring, how would you score him?
Oh my gosh, I don't even know. Like, because I don't want to score him too high, because I feel like the major mistakes that he made was just handing over the user interface and the trying too hard to do the exclusivity and just screwing up the image. Like, I don't think that he did so much damage that everything was ruined and never recovered, because obviously, look at him.
And you could have argued that, you know, the market had spoken at that point. You know, PCs were cheaper. They were doing a lot of the stuff that Macs were doing, maybe not quite everything, but that's just the way the market was going, and it may not necessarily have been his fault. And in the same way that people that can claim that Apple's success was because of Steve Jobs creating an innovative environment that carried on after he left, you could say that the downfall of Apple was because of some of the crazy innovative ideas that Steve Jobs had put in place, and people were making crazy shit that didn't sell. So it works both ways, ultimately. Yeah. So if you had to score this guy, what would you go?
I think I'm going to have to go pretty low, because he did a whole lot of really good things before and after.
Oh, yeah.
The diabetes thing, you know, selling so much Pepsi, that's not good, though.
That wasn't so good, no.
But I like Pepsi and Mountain Dew, so thanks, dude.
Too. Yeah, cheers.
I don't know. I think probably a 50. Oh, sure. We're all about half dumb.
Yeah, he's one of these guys that, you know, he did bring them a lot of money and success, but he could have brought them more, and they could have been even crazier, greater stuff. But I'm thankful it worked out the way it did. I would like to have seen Jobs. Obviously, no one wants anyone to die. I would like Steve Jobs to have stayed in the company for a little bit longer, and to have eased into retirement, and to have kind of brought people in, continued this world of innovation, have Johnny Ive continue with these innovative designs because he was out the door, like basically as soon as Jobs was in his deathbed, unfortunately.
Well, and Jobs very well could have if he had not tried to meditate his cancer away.
Yeah, take your fucking meds, people, please. If you have cancer, do not go to misinformation or whatever a name is for, you know, treatment on stuff like that. You need to take your medicine. So yeah, I think 50 is fair for John Sculley, one of the most interesting, divisive CEOs in history. Some people consider him a terrible CEO. Some people say that actually, if you look at his track record away from Apple, he's like one of the more successful ones of the last 50 years. I mean, the Pepsi Challenge, shit like that, the PDA, these are really innovative approaches to marketing and business. So it's hard to know, but I had to cover him because it's a really interesting story. And the sales pitch of, do you want to sell sugar water for the rest of your life, or do you want to change the world? Like that's gold.
It was
right
a great
there.
story. I definitely loved hearing about it and going in depth into learning more about him as a person, because I have only ever heard just the glossed over stuff from the Jobs stories.
Yes, which I would recommend as well. I think a lot of this is bore out of the fact that I like looking at old tech and old PCs. We went to a few years ago, my wife and I went on holiday to somewhere in Yorkshire, and I can't remember where exactly. It's like a UNESCO World Heritage because it's like this untouched industrial town with like the traditional terraces, and they haven't even built on them and stuff. Anyway, nearby there's a museum of technology, and they had all of these like old PCs. I was like, oh, I had that one. Oh my god, I had that one too. Oh my god, I learned to, write HTML on that one, and I, like all of this stuff. And then they had like a bunch of phones, and there were a bunch of kids walking around here going, what's that? What's that? And I'm like, oh my god, the shit I used to use is in a museum. So weird.
It all happened so fast.
Next to the fucking cotton gin, like a fucking steam engine and stuff. And then there's like my old Nokia 3310 or whatever.
How did we get here? I want to go back.
I want to be young again. I want my joints to work again. So yeah, that 50 is fair for John Sculley, a really interesting person from the history of tech and business. And I think 50 is a perfectly fair score because people either love him or hate him. So 50 is the perfect score for him, right down the middle. So that's our show for this week. Thank you all so very much. And Derek, thank you so much for all those amazing old images of the computers and the video clips and stuff. I fucking love that. It was a walk down memory lane for me.
It's fun. I like this. I like this part. I like bringing stuff. I hope that everybody that's listening and people that are watching, should be watching, get all this extra stuff.
Absolutely. And if you do want to watch the extra stuff, not only can you go to our YouTube channel and look for History's Greatest Idiots on YouTube, you'll find the videos there. You can catch our wonderful slideshows and stuff. But also, if you go onto Spotify, you can watch video podcasts right now. So go and give us a follow or a subscribe or whatever the fuck it is these days on Spotify, and you can watch the videos there. And if you would like to join our Patreon and sling us a little bit of cash and get yourself an initial wonderful present and a yearly anniversary present and behind-the-scenes access to our lives and scripts and Patreon exclusive episodes and stuff like that, and a bunch of interesting chat with us, go to patreon.com/History's Greatest Idiots. And also you can find us on Instagram. What is it? Just History's Greatest Idiots on Instagram. I drew a massive blank there, but you'll be able to find us. Yeah, thank you. I got there in the end. It was more straightforward than I was making it. We will be back. So this is going to be going out as a podcast in a week's time. If you're hearing it at the time, it's going out now. Thank you to everyone who joined us. Toastoid, it was really lovely. Kimberly, who dropped by as well briefly, thank you for joining us in the live stream. If you would like to join us for live streams, go and subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's where we put them all out. So until next time, Derek, would you like to say goodbye, please?
Goodbye, everybody.
And we will see you all again very, very soon. Take care now. Bye.